Welcome back to the Tech Startup Network podcast. Joining me today is Brandon Florian, the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Grid Aero. Brandon is a seasoned aerospace and defense leader with experience spanning strategy, innovation, and growth across government and commercial sectors. He has led business development at top firms like Northrop Grumman, Starburst, and Mandala Space Ventures. He combines technical depth with strategic vision and an unmatched network in global A&D and venture. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I'd love to have you start off by sharing more about who you are and what you're building at Grid.
Sure, yeah. I think you gave a pretty good intro about myself. Aerospace and defense has been pretty much my entire career for the last 20 years. So I've seen a lot of, cool things working both on the prime side and the, more of the commercial accelerator side for aerospace and defense. Now I'm an operator. As you mentioned, co-founder for Grid Aero. We are basically building the world's most resilient logistics network by building a new class of autonomous cargo aircraft designed to be ushering in this new wave of distributed logistics, viz. Traditional logistics and how that normally works. We're basically opening up like this paradigm shift where, both defense and commercial aviation they were originally, optimized for efficiency and stable environments, but now you're seeing that break down not just across battle spaces, but as well as like, remote and austere places and communities that are, not part of your normal hub and spoke network, if you will.
hmm Yeah. And so, as you mentioned, like the time is perfect right now. And so, I'd love to lean more into that about why autonomous cargo aircraft is the right
Yeah.
problem to solve.
Yep. I think, if you step back a little bit, the most urgent need right now is contested logistics. That's what everyone is talking about. That's been like the buzzword, for the last, I don't know, 6 months since the, SEC war basically made it one of like the six critical technology areas for the Department of War. I mean, like a lot of people probably, might not know what contested logistics is. So I'll kind of give a little bit of about what that is versus like what traditional logistics is. So basically with your traditional military logistics, you're built around secured, centralized supply chains. You have large depots, you have fixed infrastructure, predictable transportation routes. That model was built on assuming that you had like a level of sanctuary across the battle space that you could come and go as you please, that no one was going to stop you or whatnot. The problem is now modern conflict, you're seeing it in Ukraine, you're seeing it in Iran, that it breaks all assumptions for that. There's no safe space anymore. What used to be, in the rear with the gear, like that is now being targeted. So adversaries can pretty much detect, disrupt, and strike your logistics network, no matter where you are, whether that's air, sea, land. And those, what used to be centralized hubs are now actually big liabilities. So, your logistics is not just a support function anymore. It's pretty much like the, underpinning of everything that you do. And we have to shift away from this traditional model because it's increasingly vulnerable. And the only way to do so is just by having distributed, logistics across different nodes and different platforms that can carry that out. So that's, essentially that. It's the inverse model of traditional logistics.
Mhm.
So now we're just distributing delivery assets pre-positioned all over the world, and you prioritize resiliency over efficiency.
Mhm.
And the only way you can do that, though, is through low-cost, scalable systems. So you reduce your single points of failure and make it much harder for your adversary to disrupt that network.
Yeah. And I love that Grid has classified itself as the pickup truck of the skies. I saw that tagline and I was like, that's so good.
I will give credit where credit is due. When Forbes wrote that article when we came out of stealth last year, like they kind of, coined that term, and we were all like, "Oh man, this is so good. That's exactly what we are. We're like a flying pickup truck." So like we've been running with that ever since then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it really is true. And I think it helps kind of like really hope people understand the concept of what you're building at Grid. And so after coming out of self last year, would love to hear how things have changed for you, how you've reached certain milestones, if you could give an overview for us.
Yeah, so our company is not even 2 years old yet. We turn two next month. So we started in June of 24, raised our seed round late 24, turned around and basically built our first prototype in 6 months. Both, full stack, so hardware and software was built in-house. Um, we, we rolled that out to like everyone's surprise, because when do you ever hear of a company building something, especially an aircraft and an autonomous aircraft in 6 months?
Yeah.
So shortly after that, we basically decided to raise again because everyone was kind of like, oh, like, do you want more money? And, rule number one is you always raise money when you don't need it.
Yeah.
So, we basically decided to like step on the accelerator and move our timeline to the left. And we started ground testing the vehicle late last year. It's been going through its paces. We're there's going to be a lot of major news developments coming out that I can't disclose yet. But we're moving quick.
Mhm.
And everyone that sees us like always tells us like you guys are executing unbelievably fast. Um, since then, obviously, since like as I mentioned before, the Sec War made contested logistics like a top priority. Even though there are six critical technology areas, contested logistics is probably in the top two, if not the most important, the second most important. And so there's been a huge amount of interest from across the Department of War. Pretty much any service you can think of, we're talking to. Yeah, it's just been the amount of inbounds has been overwhelming to say the least.
Mhm.
And we're executing currently on a direct to phase two with AFWorks. So we've been doing that. We've we're in the process of starting to execute on certain other things. Again, I can't really disclose any of that right now.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, just we've been hitting milestone after milestone, pretty much adhering to the original schedule that we initially set for ourselves. And it's just hats off to our engineering team who's just, running full tilt on executing everything that we put ourselves down for. So
Absolutely. And I think it's incredible. And as you shared, just the interest right now is huge. Like it was, I think, end of April that the Department of War posted on social media, paraphrasing, but something along the lines of the future of war is autonomous. And I feel like
mhm.
that is just guiding everything that's been coming, and all this attention is coming to autonomous companies like Grid. And so I think it's just such an exciting time for you to be building in this year right now.
Yeah, I think we started, we, my CEO had the vision of this platform just because of the shortcomings he saw when he was working at other previous autonomous companies. And that was mostly related to the government customer.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Specifically focused, our platform was designed for the Indo-Pacific theater.
Hmm.
Um, but if it can operate in that theater, it can operate anywhere in the world. Just because within Indo-Pacific theaters, you're looking at distances between island chains, that are, some of the largest distances that you'll find in the world as far as like getting from point A to point B.
Hmm.
Um, so we've started with that, but it's quickly progressed to saying, well, can you go here and can you go there? And we pretty much, yeah, it's an airplane. Airplanes go everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
I think we honed in on the need and requirement, and now we're just the government is starting to realize that like this is, as you said, this is a pickup truck.
Hmm.
It's a common chassis that you can do a lot of things off of, and pretty much let them use it however they want,
Yeah.
and we just provide them the platform.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, you and your team built the product in 6 months, which is remarkably fast. And so, in addition to funding, else do you think kind of contributed to that quick timeline of just getting things done?
Um, I think I think team is definitely a big part of that. Like the people that we have on the team, like they come with just a wealth of experience from other companies
Mhm.
that they've worked in the past. It's not their first rodeo, so like they've been through this like cycle before, and I think just having people that operate at a certain level and are able to execute quickly. I think that's a testament to how we've been able to do as so much so fast.
hmm Yeah. And what makes Grid different from existing cargo aircraft or drone companies? What are the things that you're doing that has kind of positioned you to be in a better spot?
Yeah, so the easiest way I can, say it is basically like uh, we took a clean sheet approach to the aircraft design for our aircraft. Uh, Other people in the space have opted to do more of a retrofit like
hmm
option, right? So a lot of them are retrofitting existing manned, commercial cargo aircraft, small commercial cargo aircraft like your Cessna 208s and whatnot. Um, and we basically decided to, do away with that. Where we kind of like went complete opposite, and we said we're just going to build a super low cost attritable aircraft, like similar to your, Waco wooden gliders from World War II, that you don't mind losing. They're ultra cheap, right? And so you can field large numbers of these and basically bring mass at scale for what you're doing. So we literally use all, COTS components, like nothing is exquisite on the aircraft. Um, there are no aerospace grade type components because it's not going to carry people. It's literally going
hmm
to just be, a box carrier, right? And because of that, we're able to reduce the price of the aircraft significantly compared to other commercial offerings because all those other commercial offerings were built to have people on board. And so the systems that those platforms require to fly are very expensive. Um, and then, of course, if you compare that to like your current manned cargo platforms that the military uses, like one, we only have a few hundred of them in service. Two, they're super expensive to acquire, um, and they take a while. So, like, you can order a C-130 from Lockheed Martin for, a particular service. It costs you $120 million to start, but then you still have to wait like, 2, 3, 5 years to get it because you're in line behind everyone else that needs one as well, since it's sold internationally to allied governments. Um, and that's if you get into you know a shooting war with a peer adversary and you can't operate your cargo aircraft in a contested environment because it will be shut down. Um, you're going to lose those pretty quickly, and the warfighter at the edge is not going to get its supplies that it needs,
hmm
and that's not going to be good. So, yeah, I think our main, differentiation point is the attritability, the nature of attritability of this aircraft. Um, and still being able to do thousands of pounds for thousands of miles.
hmm And as you mentioned too, I mean, just the cost factor is huge. I mean, a lot of the legacy aircraft is so expensive and potentially outdated and old. And so I love that you mentioned that Grid is really focusing on like maybe not having all of the top stuff that these other aircraft have, but just getting the job done and being able to do it at a much more affordable price.
That's right. That's exactly right. And like I just want to highlight that, like, look, we're not trying to replace the C-130s or the C-17s. I mean, the C-17s, they're no longer produced. The C-130s are still produced. They're the only cargo aircraft the military has that currently is still in production. We're not. telling the military like, oh, look, you don't have to order C-130s anymore. You could just order a bunch of these planes. We're looking to augment the capability um, and leave those strategic airlift assets for the most important missions, which is moving people and
Hmm.
moving other heavy assets, right? So the government realizes this because they have a big problem where the average plane load for some of these, strategic airlift assets is only a few thousand pounds. And when you're talking about a plane that has a capacity, of like 44,000 pounds for the C-130 and 100,000 pounds for the C-17, like, you're only using 1 to 2% of its available capacity. And like these things cost tens of thousands of dollars to operate per hour. You have to have a crew on standby, like, and it's just like there's so much uh, added to the logistical tale of having to like have these planes in operation, um, that for moving 1,000 pounds, you're it's a huge inefficiency for the
Hmm.
military. So we're basically saying like, look, you can take away all that demand from those platforms, right size your mission with a smaller plane that can do the same thing for you, but it can fly at any time. You don't need crew for it besides like your human over the loop operator that tells it where to go. And just save the larger assets for very specific missions,
Yeah.
much more important missions.
Absolutely. And I love what you mentioned there about augmenting the C-130. So not replacing it, but really being able to support it and supplement it. And so
Yeah.
that's one question I have for you is initially, how did you work to gain trust with your defense customers as you're starting to deploy autonomy to kind of really make them feel comfortable with it and start to put that into execution?
So I think one, it's having the network already in place. So like people that knew you from other things, um, other entry points within the government where like you either come recommended by someone or, former military that you bring on as advisors. We have a really stellar group of advisors, from retired three-star generals all the way down to, retired colonels that actually flew C-130s in the Indo-Pacific and know, the pain points that they experienced. Um, our chief commercial strategy officer, Gerdo, he was the contested logistics subject matter expert for Air Force Special Operations Command before he retired about a year and a half ago. And we were lucky to bring him on board. But I
Mhm.
mean, this guy, career logistics readiness officer, has, had to figure out how to supply war fighters at the edge his entire career. So just having those types of, that person on the team that can then turn around and leverage his network as well and get us in front of the right people and talk to the right people and basically hear what their pain points are, as well as tell them what capabilities we're offering. And, you know, through all that customer discovery and feedback that we've been doing over the last 19, well, actually almost 24 months since we started, we've been able to like really refine a good product that resonates with every service.
Mhm.
um, there hasn't been anyone that has said like, no, this doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
or like, where did you guys come up with that number or that requirement? Like, so I think it's not only having the access, but having the relationship and trust that's built, um, by being in this industry. And that's why I always say that, aerospace and defense is one of these industries that's built on trust. So it's really good to come from this industry, and not try to break into it if you're not from this industry. I think that's a very big uphill battle that many people who want to play in defense tech don't understand. And especially when it comes to government BD, like I talked about this on another podcast, with Dan Magee, his Drone Wars podcast. But basically, like, government BD is sort of like black magic. Like, it's a long sales cycle. It's all built on relationships and continuous touch points and continuous, like, feedback loops. And it's not something that's, like, you have a few meetings and it's a slam dunk, right? Like, you just got to keep building and keep, um, you know, pretty much stay in their face, like,
Yeah.
and push things across the finish line. Um, so Yeah, I mean that's how we do it. That's how we did it. Like that's our secret sauce. Obviously, there's a lot more detail behind that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, credibility and relationships are key. And I love the reminder that you shared for newer defense tech founders, whether they're aspiring or already building something, is to just be in the industry, be in the field, have that world experience. And that's one thing I'd love to ask you about next is
Mm,
since defense tech has so much interest and there's so much happening right now,
yeah.
what other advice would you give to a defense tech founder just from what you've learned throughout your own journey?
Um, I would say that uh, you have to be open to criticism,
Hmm.
both good and bad. Um, you have to be willing to listen to the customer. Um, I just came from a few weeks ago, Army had a demand signal event at Stanford. And you had a bunch of like these, Army generals sitting on panels talking about, the future of autonomy and the future of, other innovation and how the Army was adopting it. And, you know, one of the generals sat there and he said something really poignant that stuck with me. And he said, there's there's a problem right now with defense tech companies where they're bringing their solution to the customer without receiving any input from the customer,
Hmm.
right? Which makes it a lot harder to sell, right? Um, if you're gonna operate in this industry, you need to do it the opposite way. You need to figure out what the pain points are with the customer, and that's through hundreds of calls and chats, which is called customer discovery. And then you take take that feedback and any requirements that you're able to parse out of, and then build your MVP around that. And
Hmm.
then you turn around and take it back to the customer and say, is this what you're looking for? It's kind of like a whole bring me a rock type of like scenario, right? And so that's I think the biggest piece of advice for defense tech founders is you got to hear what the customer wants. It's not what you want. It's not what you want to build, right? Like the next fanciest, coolest widget. It's something that actually solves the problem. And that starts with talking to who you want your customer to be.
Nailed it. And it's something that's so simple but so important, just true product market fit. And you worded it so perfectly as just not building what you think your audience wants, but building what they tell you they want and what they
Right.
need.
Right. And I think it goes one layer deeper than just a product market fit. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, and that's your team, right?
Hmm.
So the product market fit is two of the three. And I think who you bring onto your team um, really kind of like wraps that into like a nice little package and puts a bow on it. Because if you have a team that has never executed within this industry, um, I feel like you're at a disadvantage.
Right.
When it comes to actually building something for the defense industry.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I don't want to sound dismissive about it, but like, I mean, you do learn a lot being in this industry and working for other large corporations, like like your primes or your neo primes, right? And cutting your teeth there first, um, because it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, 100%. And at the same time, like you're building for both defense and commercial logistics. So it's two different markets, but they both care a lot about the problems that they have right now. And so that's one question I have for you is how do you focus on both areas without losing focus?
So, good question. And the easiest answer I can give you is that right now, even though we have early connection points with commercial, um, the commercial market is not there yet. And that has a lot to do with the regulatory aspects that are not put in place yet for the operation of large unmanned aircraft over the national airspace. So a lot of that has to do with just the FAA, finalizing what that regulatory policy is going to look like what the rules are going to be. And so for us, we don't have to worry too much about focusing our efforts on commercial because we know that that market is years away, right?
Hmm.
It's not going to happen overnight. And I think, a lot of people in our space who came before us um, have realized that in the last year or two. And that's why it's like that's why we kind of like see this like bandwagon behavior of a lot of commercial companies that originally started as aerial mobility companies or autonomous last mile logistics delivery companies for commercial applications kind of like pivoting and saying, oh, we're gonna go back to the defense market. We're
Hmm.
gonna offer this stuff for the defense market, right? But the problem lies in that, well, you just developed a commercial solution and you're now force fitting that solution back to the military customer when they never told you what they wanted in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So it's that problem that I talked to you about before, where like, yeah, you might have a solution, it might check one or two boxes, but as you go further down the list, there might be just enough that they're like it kills you from gaining more traction or gaining a military contract because it doesn't fulfill all the requirements necessary.
Yeah, that makes total sense. But it also sounds like too, since you mentioned that defense is really where to start, that it almost sounds like that's kind of like the natural pathway is maybe proving at defense and then moving into commercial and then maybe one day moving it over to civilian.
Yeah, that's right. There is a natural pathway, like starting with the military customer, that gives you certain advantages. That's not to say that you can't do it the opposite way, but I think you just have to be very weary of the market that you're treading into and understand all the nuances before you decide whether you pursue a commercial pathway first or defense pathway.
Right. Yeah. And on that note, for anything you're able to talk about right now, I'd love to hear what Grid is working on, exciting plans or new developments.
Things I can talk about. We're rapidly growing our team.
Mhm.
So we are hiring for some key spots. You can go to our careers page, grid.aero. Um, Check those out. We are going to be building more planes this year. Um, and That's probably about the extent that I can talk about right now.
It sounds like I may have to have you on again in another year or so to talk about all the things that you couldn't talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm not trying to be coy about it or anything. I just think
Right.
that, a lot of like, what we're doing right now, um, not that there's like a certain level of like secrecy associated, like,
Hmm.
it's just, we don't want to, put out any image that is, not accurate, right?
Right.
And we want to
Yeah.
be really mindful of where we are exactly as a company. And when the moment is right, we will disclose, other milestones as well.
Hmm.
Um, we're not about like the all the bluster that is sometimes associated with defense tech hype.
Yeah. Yeah. You nailed it. But it's also a good sign too that there's so many things you can't talk about because it shows that things are happening and that things are in the
Yeah,
works. So I'm
yeah,
really
no,
looking
for sure.
forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, please, I would recommend, I would say that for, whoever's interested in following our journey, please like our or follow us on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
So, you get all the latest and greatest updates. I'm sure you'll be hearing, press releases as they happen. So yeah. Um, yeah.
Love it.
Please do. Please follow us. Please keep us on your radar.
Hmm. 100%. And one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is I always love to have them give a shout out to someone in tech that they're feeling really inspired by right now. So could be a fellow founder, could be a VC, community builder. Would love to hear someone that you're really admiring lately.
Someone I'm really admiring lately. Man, there are a lot of good founders out there doing some really cool stuff. Um, I think two of the biggest companies that like I'm bullish on and like I'm excited for like what they're doing. One of them is C2X. So sorry, CX2. So they're an electromagnetic warfare company, I guess you could say. CEO is Nathan Mintz. Nathan Mintz is like a serial founder. So he started Epirus and then he started Spartan Robotics. And now that he's on his third company. So yeah, Nathan, great person, good friend. Um, I'll actually be seeing him at Soft Week next week. And then uh, Michael from Aurelius. So Aurelius, I really like their directed energy counter UAS stuff that they're working on. They have huge traction. You know, that's something that was like sorely needed years ago.
Mhm.
Um, much like many of the technologies that all of us as founders are currently developing. So to see both those companies getting a lot of limelight and getting pushed along, um, I think those are the two of the biggest two of the companies that like I'm inspired by, just because you're seeing interest for technology that is really important to national security and defense.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, those would be the two.
Amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
Brandon, this has been such a good episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the show. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online because I'd like to learn more.
Yeah, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Grid Aero and then Brandon Florian. You know, hopefully come across you guys conferences or events, Soft Week next week. If you guys are there, definitely drop me a line. And then yeah, other events throughout the year. So uh, that's the easiest way to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on today's show. It was so great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to chatting again in the future.